Namaskar. Jayaji has been conducting weekly Bhagavad Gita classes in Mumbai for the past several years. The last two classes on Wednesdays received an overwhelming response. The hall was filled with curiosity, warmth, and positive energy. Those of you in Mumbai, do join us again on Wednesday, 6th May, and every Wednesday thereafter, and be part of this uplifting experience. Click the link in the description box to register for free. Now, for our friends in Bangalore, a special announcement. Jayaji returns to your city with talks on Bhagavad Gita Chapter 4 Wisdom in Action. Join us over the weekend of 30th and 31st May from 6 to 7:30 pm at Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Hall, Vasant Nagar. Register for free through the link in the description. I'm sure we all know someone in Bangalore who would benefit. Let us together spread the word and invite them to attend. A simple call or message will go a long way. Now, I invite Jayaji to begin Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 7.
ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः
It's wonderful to have you all here. And it was so encouraging to hear all of you chant the invocation together. There is a travel site, a popular travel site, that asked people, what is the number one destination that everyone should go to at least once in their lifetime? And these were not Indians. All over the world they asked. But they got one answer. And that is India. And what they said was, whether they were Americans, British, Europeans, South Africans, Australians, all of them said that India has an aura. It is an extraordinary place. It is so diverse. And one guy said, I was completely bowled over. Another person said, it changed my life. Now, what is it about India that is so striking? This is something that we need to understand because we don't get it. Where do we want to go? US, South Africa, Australia, Europe, Russia, Croatia, any place except India. So there's a disconnect, and that disconnect is so unfortunate that after 200 years of British rule, and prior to that the Mughals and so many invaders came, the British have left 75 years ago. But that hangover effect is still there. In fact, it has increased. Because now, with every passing generation, people want anything but Indian. And the younger generation now, they are completely disconnected from the culture. And why is it so? Because we, the adults, don't have it. And yet, particularly the Bhagavad Gita and Vedanta, has answers to all our questions. Now let's take one question. What is something that you want to do very badly, and every day you say, I must do it? Like, for instance, it could be exercise, it could be waking up early in the morning and studying the Bhagavad Gita. I hope it is. Anything good that you want to do, but you're not able to do it. Right? Now, you all have a pad and a pen. Please write it down. That one thing that you want to do and you're unable to do. Okay? Now, why is this happening? Because there is a disconnect between knowledge and action. And that gap is widening. Knowledge is easy. So, we know we should exercise every day. We know we must be disciplined. We know we should work hard. We know we should be good. Follow the good path. And yet there is something that comes in the way. What is it is the question. And this chapter that we're going to take, chapter 7, speaks of that. The title of the chapter is Jnana Vijnana Yoga, means the yoga of wisdom, knowledge and wisdom. So through the ages, through our life, we have always felt the pull of something higher, isn't it? And this desire for the higher is dormant. That is because there are distractions. And the worldly distractions are so tempting that people come and say, I want to come to your class lecture, but something comes in the way. Why is it that many of you have, some of you have come and told me, I've always wanted to come. What comes in the way? You see, the world is hostile to spiritual awakening. And you say there are distractions, but the distractions are provided to you because you want them. The whole science and technology has developed to suit you. So don't complain about distractions. They are there because you want it. The moment you start demanding spiritual knowledge, it will come to you. So, all that we must do is be open to our rich legacy. You know, all other countries of the world, particularly the developed countries of the world, have everything except spiritual content. We may not have the best that they have, but we have something that the rest of the world needs, and needs very badly. Because without this knowledge, people don't achieve their potential. It's like a chicken flying. Have you seen a chicken trying to fly? It furiously flaps its wings. It makes a great deal of noise. And then before it's off the ground, it's back on the ground. So our growth is like that. Suddenly you pop, the whole country. There was such a noise about, we become the third largest economy in the world. Correct? Now where are we? 6. This is it. Without this knowledge, you can't retain, even if you get it, you can't maintain it. And then, do you have meaningful relationships? I'm not asking for an answer, please, because I know the answer. With every passing generation, whatever little was left in us, where we had wonderful family relationships, the larger family, and I'm not talking about joint family. We lived separately in different cities and all, but there was a connect. And we all met once a year. And we had lovely times together. Not luxury, simple. Simple food, simple lifestyle. But it was the highlight of our lives. Today, nobody wants to live like that. It was like a dormitory. Mattresses were spread from one wall to the other, and all of us slept together in one room. That joy is gone. Today, everyone wants, what is it called? Space, yeah. But, rooms with attached bathrooms. Separate rooms, attached bath. The problem is attachment. And now you got attachment to family members is bad enough. Now you're attached to bathrooms. So, what this gathering is about is to revisit our old concepts, redefine our values. What are we human beings for? Ask yourself, why was I born? What is my mission in life? What is it that I want to achieve before I die? Do you have any idea? No, we're only looking at the next movie to watch. The other day somebody said, I'm waiting for Dhurandhar 3 to come. Change your thinking. Look at what you value in life. And is it worth it? Is it going to stay? Gain clarity of thinking. Once there was a place where in a church they had Sunday school for children. And after that they gave lunch for all the kids. So it was a buffet. The kids were going. The first counter was apples. So there was a sign that said, take only one, God is watching. So everybody took one. And at the end of that buffet were chocolates kept there. And one girl saw the chocolates and she wrote a nice message there. On a placard, she said, take as many as you want, God is watching the apples. This is clarity of thinking which a child has. But by the time we grow, we finish. We're gone. And rediscover the real you. Every morning we wake up feeling something missing. An emptiness. And that haunts us through our lives. From morning to night, from the time we were born till the time we die, it goes on. And we're trying desperately to fill it. Nobody has filled it. Why is the question? Forget everybody else. Ask yourself, why do I still feel empty? In spite of having so much in life. We all, I don't know many of you, but I can say with confidence, we all belong to the privileged class, right? Compared to the people down there. And we don't seem to have it. And amazingly, the people down there seem to have it. People who have nothing. Like Sudama had. He was born in poverty, he was brought up in poverty, and yet never once did he feel deprived. And so even when he was sent on a mission to ask for help to Krishna, his dear friend, who was a king, enjoying his life in opulence, he only thought of What can I give him? What a thought. Do we have that thought? We don't think of giving. Forget giving to any person. We don't think of giving to a cause. See, you want the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita. What have you done to support it? I'm not talking about money, please. That is the last thing. What have you done to inculcate those values in you and to pass them on at least to your children and grandchildren? Forget society and nation is a far cry. Do you have any guarantee that your children are not going to fight over their inheritance? You see others, you read in the newspapers about others. Do you have any guarantee that that other is not going to be you? What have you done to empower your children with values? And then you call someone over. And even then you don't have the attitude of giving. You want free. Please remember, nothing comes for free. You want spiritual development, you have to pay the price. And I don't mean money. Money is the easiest thing. Effort, thinking, hard work within yourself. Because the battle is going on inside of you, not outside. So, long before you take on the world, you have to win against your greatest adversary, and that is you. You have programmed yourself to believe you can't, that you're weak, that you're fragile, that you're dependent, you're sensitive. You have imposed restrictions on yourself. You have become subservient to the world, haven't you? You see a rich man, you think, why? Because you have value for the money that he has, not him. And he also understands that. You look at, see, you become weary of battle. Think of a challenge and you give up. The next conquest is daunting. You don't have the energy. So why? Because you look at obstacles, not at opportunities. Every time something happens, you say, oh, COVID came, what will happen to me? What has happened? Nothing has happened. Now Iran war, what will happen to me? I'm not getting a gas cylinder. The world is at stake and you're worried about your LPG cylinder. You worry about failing. You don't think of winning. Using golf technology, you've lost your swing. Not physically, not out there, but in your mind. And when you lose it in your mind, you've lost it. You've lost the whole thing. You've lost the game. And how do you regain it? You know, once when I was I was much younger, many years ago, I was very inspired and enthusiastic and excited about spreading the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita. And then I realized, I said, who am I talking to? What am I doing? What can I do? And then I felt little low. I saw a hoarding which said, it quoted Mahatma Gandhi, said, find purpose, the means will follow. What a powerful statement. I said, yes, I don't have money, I don't have connections, I don't have so many things, but I have purpose. And the means always followed. So that's what it is. When you see the power in your mind, you don't know because you haven't harnessed it. It's like external power. When energy is harnessed, there is power. When water moves in one direction, what happens? Hydroelectric power. When wind moves in one direction, there is power generated. Air under pressure cuts through rock, develops that power. Same thing with us, please. Our thoughts are extremely powerful, but you haven't experienced it because they're scattered, they're going all over the place. You gather your thoughts and you can perform miracles. This is it. It's not a miracle. It happens. Take a look at Hanuman in the Ramayana. It is about Rama, yes. But Hanuman has a position that is unmatched. Why? He was a monkey, Hanuman. Because in the beginning, his thoughts were scattered. So he's a monkey. Because the monkey and the mind share two characteristics. Asthira, Chanchala. Asthira is constantly jumping from place to place. Have you seen a monkey? It never sits still. And even at one place, it's restless. It keeps scratching. Our mind is like that. Your body is here, but your mind is already gone. And you don't even know where the mind has gone. Until something happens, like the phone rang, you come back. And then again it goes. But Hanuman, the moment he came in contact with Sri Ram, his mind, which was scattered, became single point. And that's when he got the power. So many people believe that Ram gave the power to him. No, he had it already. All that happened was he became focused. And what miracles he performed. He brought a mountain from the Himalayas to treat Lakshman. He burnt the whole of Lanka with his tail. He did so many things. He played a stellar role in the battle against Ravana. How did that all happen? Just the mind, focused. You try that. One day remain focused. That's why we say you must plan the day before you actually start living it. So plan what you're going to do tomorrow, at least the main things, today. And then tomorrow you're focused. Otherwise, what happens? You bump into a friend somewhere and she says, come, let's go somewhere for tea, and off you go. And then somebody else invites you to lunch and you go there. And by the end of the day, you realize, I haven't done anything. Important matters that need to be dealt with, you haven't done. So just write it down. And now we all have phones. We all have calendars. There is no excuse anymore. Technology has given us everything. So gathered. The same thought scattered has no energy. The same thought gathered has tremendous energy. Next, we are all out to change the world. See, our business is not to change the world. Our business is to change ourselves. And once you change your mind, the world automatically changes. That is what Swami Vivekananda roared with this truth all over America. He said, change your mind and you will automatically change the world. Try it. Just try it. You know, we all have negative relationships with someone or the other. Think of that person in a positive manner. Not just once, twice, continuously. Because for so many years you've been thinking negatively of the person. Think positively and see how liberated you feel. See, it's this negative thought that results in self-destruction. Whether anything happens to the other person or not is not the matter. It doesn't happen because the other person may not even be aware that you're negative about him or her. But it sure as hell kills you. No? You get sugar, you get high blood pressure, you get this, that and the other. Cardiac problems, kidney problems. The source of all that is the mind. Do you know that? And negative thinking. That reduces you to, it just crushes you. It's like taking a piece of paper and crushing it. That is your state when you think negatively. And you're not even aware. So the first step is to be aware. Track your thinking. Napoleon, mind you, said, there are two powers in the world. The power of the sword and the power of the spirit. And he said, the spirit always vanquished the sword. This is Napoleon saying. So, you have to go back into your own life, take a look at others who have changed things around. When Nelson Mandela was released from prison where he was in for 38 years, long time, and they tortured him, they did all kinds of things with him. As he came out of the prison, he said, as I walk out, if I continue to think negatively of these people who have done harm to me, I will still be in that prison. And we are all in prisons of our own making. And it is this prison that doesn't allow us to break free and enjoy the world. World is meant for you to enjoy, right? You are not enjoying because of this negativity. As long as you identify with matter, see the world, you, everything, you consist of two basic components, matter and spirit. As long as you identify with matter, as long as you're involved with matter, you're attached to matter, you're focused on matter, you become a slave to the world. Because see, the matter layers in you are body, mind, intellect. You identify with body, the body is constantly making demands. Body wants what? Color and form for the eye, sound for the ears, taste for the tongue, smell for the nose, and touch for the skin. So when you identify with the body, you are going out into the world for fulfillment. So you're dependent. Worse still, identify with the mind. And you feel neglected. You feel unloved. You feel deprived. And you go out into the world for emotions. That's what we do, right? You're going out and saying, please love me. Please look at me. There's a poem about a painter, Andrea del Sarto. He was a brilliant painter, but he had fallen in love with his wife, his own wife, and totally attached to the wife. But the wife was not interested in him. So the wife was sitting at the window, waiting for her lover to come. This guy knows it. He knows that the wife is in love with someone else. But he's saying, and whatever her name is, says, please, I know you're waiting for him, but he hasn't come yet. So look at me, just once. What a miserable life. You read it and you feel sick. But this is it. When you identify with the mind, you're constantly asking. And one thing is, the more you ask, the more the person does not want to give. This is a fact. So if you really want somebody, turn away. Just tell yourself, I don't need. I don't need the person. I don't need anything. You know what will happen? That person will come running after you. It happens even with inanimate things. You chase after an object, the object runs away from you. Turn your back on the object comes to you. Same thing with people. Same thing with fame, name, anything in the world. So that when do you gain mastery? Identify with the spirit. Then what happens? You understand you are full. F-U-L-L. Identify with matter, you become F-O-O-L. It's as simple as that. You become a master. You know, when Alexander came conquering to India, his people caught hold of a sage, a realized soul, and put him in prison. He was a sage, he didn't want anything. He had a room to himself, with 2 square meals were provided to him, he was happy. Then his people went and told him, says, you're committing a crime, you cannot keep this sage in a prison. You must release him. So Alexander wanted some face-saving device. Now he had put him in prison, he wants something, some excuse to release him. He can't just say, I'm sorry, I put you in prison. So he went to the sage and he said, ask me for anything. I will give you. Now he wanted the sage to say, let me go. The sage said, you have provided me everything. You're looking after me so well. What can I ask for? He didn't ask. And then Alexander got so infuriated, so angry with him. I insist you must ask. So he said, please step aside so that the sunlight may come from the window to me. And that is how he was released. So, you know, a person who doesn't want anything is admired, is worshipped, is given everything. So learn the art of saying no to the world. You can't say no because you're enslaved. Because you want, right? You have desires. So the Bhagavad Gita gives you the knowledge to understand yourself. Identify your strengths and leverage them. So we are on the 7th chapter. Those of you who have missed the earlier 6 chapters, don't worry. It's not about covering the chapters. It's about self-enrichment. And you can do that with one verse, one word, one concept. This doesn't mean don't come next week. Please come. But don't feel bad that you've missed out. Those who really want to go through it, we have pen drives of the recordings. And they're even better than actually coming here live. Not better, but they're as good. So let's take an overview of the 7th chapter. The first 6 verses deal with 2 aspects of me. Now, me, throughout the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna uses the word me. Now, what does it mean? Every prophet has it. Christ said, come to me, I will redeem you. Muhammad said the same thing. Every great leader has said that. And you know what? The followers have completely misunderstood this one pronoun, me. And on the basis of this, there are battles being fought, there are people being killed, there is hatred and animosity everywhere. It's so much so that people tell me, is it religious? What are you talking about? Is it religion? Then I don't want it. It's because of this misunderstanding. Now let's analyze. See, you have the choice. We all consist of 4 components: body, mind, intellect and spirit. Correct. You have the choice of identifying with any one or more components. So if you identify with the body, you become a physical personality. And then your body is me. So when you tell someone, I'm going to the movie tomorrow, will you come with me? What are you referring to? When you say me, what are you referring to? Body. When a friend of you in New York has just lost a family member and is in grief, you call and talk to her and say, it's a terrible thing that has happened. I feel the same. I am with you. I am with you. I means what? It can't be body because you're 10,000 miles away. What are you referring to? Mind. My mind is with you. My feelings are with you. I'm with you. Then when a professor is teaching his class and it's complex chemical physics or chemistry or something, and he suddenly realizes that his students have this glazed look in their face, in their eyes. Sometimes it happens with the Gita lecture also. Then he knows they're not following. So he says, are you with me? The student can't say, sir, like I am with you, I'm sitting here physically. But what he means is, are you with my thoughts, with my intellect? Now take a person who has completely and wholly identified with spirit and has become Atman, become God. Krishna was one such. When he says, what is he saying here? Me. What does he mean? Huh? Spirit, correct. So he's not asking you to worship Krishna. He's not asking you to pay obeisance to him. He's not asking you to recite 1,000 names of Krishna. And therefore it is not a religion. Religion means it is not based on one deity or one prophet. You can denounce Krishna. You can say, I'm not his follower. But if you follow the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita and get to self-realization, by God, you become Krishna. Because Krishna was spirit. So you must remember this. Never forget that when any prophet says me, he means Atman. And the way to locate Atman, the way to get to Krishna is how? Huh? Sorry?
By detaching ourselves from body and mind.
Definitely not. You know what it is? Look within. Look within because spirit is inside you. It's not out there. So don't go on pilgrimage to, what is that? Kailash Manas Sarovar. Spirit is not there. I mean, of course it's there. Don't go to, where else do you go on pilgrimage? Char Dham, Kedarnath, Badrinath. Don't go. Amarnath. I'm not saying don't go there. Don't get me wrong. You can go wherever you want. But you want to locate spirit, you have to look within. You want to catch hold of your shadow, you can't go there. What must you do? You've got it. So, all realized souls have said that. So, anyway, where are we? Yeah. So, two aspects of Brahman, and then verses 7 to 11, we're talking of expressions of Brahman. How does Brahman express in the world? 12 to 15, very interesting. The ignorant chase the world. Why do you chase the world? We are all ignorant. Because you don't know. You don't know what lies inside you. And then he says, 4 noble types turn to God. Verses 16 to 19. And then See, it's not that you don't get what you want. You get what you want. But whatever you seek, you get. You seek, ignorant people seek finite fruit, they get it. Why are people ignorant? Because Brahman is hidden. It's not in your face. You can't see it. That's why in the 10th chapter he says, Arjuna asks for it, or 10th or 11th. Then Krishna says, I will give you the Divya Chakshu, divine eye with which to see. Because with your eyes you can't see. What do you see? You see dirt, filth, negativity, selfishness. And then the last is the wise get liberated. So we start with verse 1.
श्रीभगवानुवाच मय्यासक्तमनः पार्थ योगं युञ्जन्मदाश्रयः असंशयं समग्रं माम् यथा ज्ञास्यसि तच्छृणु.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, Krishna starts speaking. He says, listen, O Partha. Partha is another name for Arjuna. How? By practicing yoga with the mind intent on me, taking shelter in me, you can, without doubt, know me fully. So as I said, me means Atman. Now, mind intent on me means again Atman. So you have to shift from body to Atman, from mind to Atman, from intellect to Atman. Anything from the time you wake up in the morning, you have to tell yourself, I have to keep shifting. You know, this is why there's a story of a saint who used to sit transplanting rice. You know, rice has to be transplanted. You know the procedure? That's all he did. He didn't speak a word. And then his disciples went and said, Master, please teach us. And they kept saying, teach us, teach us. He says, I've been teaching you all these years, you're not getting it. What must you do? Transplant your thought from the world to the spirit. Why is that? Because the law is, as you think, so you become. Whatever you think, you become that. We've become the body, mind, intellect. And therefore we are experiencing dependency, finitude, pettiness, all of this. So change and set your direction. So there's a beautiful poem called The Ancient Mariner. English poem. Look it up. After you finish today, tomorrow morning you look it up. It's a beautiful poem, longish poem. So it's the story of a mariner, the captain of a ship, who goes on a voyage and learns through experience and comes back a wise person, an enlightened person. So he wants to spread the knowledge to others. If anyone who's got it wants to give it out because it's so precious and it's so fulfilling. So he comes out and he sees 3 wedding guests going to a wedding. So the poem goes like this. It is an ancient mariner. And he stoppeth one of 3. 3 wedding guests are going, he stops only one. And that guy says, by thy long beard and glittering eye, wherefore thou stoppest me? The bridegroom's doors are open wide, and I am next of kin. The guests are met, the feast is set. You can hear the merry din. The mariner holds him with his skinny hand and starts his narration. There was a ship, quoth he. This guy gets so scared. He says, he thinks he's a madman. He says, leave me alone. He leaves him and he holds him with his glittering eye. The wedding guest stood still. and listens like a 3 years child. The mariner hath his will. By the time he finishes his story, the wedding guest turns. Turns where? Away from the wedding. The wedding represents materialistic pursuits. 3 guests going, Sattvic, Rajasic, Tamasic. The mariner, the guru, doesn't meddle with the Rajasic and Tamasic people. There is no hope for them. He catches hold of the Sattvic guy and starts. There was a ship, quoth he. Just as we are reaching out to you with the message of the Bhagavad Gita. And you might say, I have my program. That's what this guy is saying. Can't you see? The wedding is there and I am next of kin. Every one of us has a program. But then he holds him with his glittering eye. There's something about the Bhagavad Gita. There's something about the higher that attracts us. And you drop everything else and come. Now don't get worried. You're not going to drop anything. It's just about a shift in thinking. And the moment you shift, you feel so empowered, so happy. And then everything goes well with you. But you have to experience that. How can I tell? I can tell you, I can talk to you. I can't make you live it. You have to live it. So then he says, mind intent on me, the mind has to, see, if you can't fix the spirit, if you can't fix Atman as a goal, it's too easy, too subtle for you. Fix a higher goal, which is something you can relate to, something you can conceive, something that inspires you, whatever it is. In every field you can do that. You're in business. Look, switch from profiteering to adding value. You're a teacher. Look at how best you can convey these ideas and inspire your students. Because today, knowledge is not, you're not a teacher to give knowledge. They can get better knowledge. All they have to do is do a Google search. Google is the greatest guru. What you teach, Google can do 10 times better. But why are you there as a teacher then? To provide inspiration, to provide values. You know, you think back in your school and college days, I think back to my teachers, my best teachers, whom I still adore and worship because I am what I am because of them. I don't remember the subject they taught. Not one word. But I remember the inspiration they conveyed. Something beyond the words, beyond the subject. That is what you should provide to your children, to your students. And we are not doing that. We're only focusing on academics. How many marks you got is not the question. A robot can do better than you in an exam. Because all you're doing is vomiting out stuff that you've learned by heart. That doesn't inspire anybody. But in and through that, it's between the lines, beyond the words, the spirit. And how can you do that? Only when you have a higher ideal, right? And that makes for success. Steve Jobs has said that about technology. So you don't just make something and push it down the consumer's throat, whether he likes it or not. You have to decipher what the consumer needs and provide it. And sometimes the consumer doesn't even know what he needs. It's for you to figure out what he needs and provide it. So a lawyer has to look at how best can I uphold righteousness. That's what you're a lawyer for, not just to charge a fee. You're a doctor to look after the patient, not to make money. Of course, money will come to you. I have seen wonderful doctors whose clinics are overflowing with patients who are just totally dedicated to the patient. And there are others whose clinics are empty. Nobody wants to go there. Why? You figure it out. Why was Ustad Bismillah Khan's? What is it that was so special about him? You know what was special about him? Because through his music, he conveyed the spirit. You listen to Bismillah Khan's recordings. If you have the eye for music, oh my God, he can transport you to a different world altogether. He did not pursue music for money. But he got the Bharat Ratna. And all the guys who were doing it for money. See, it's not that you should not earn money. Please don't get me wrong. But that should not be your focus. Practice yoga. Practice yoga is not doing asanas and pranayam. It is yoga comes from the root yuja, which means to join back with your spirit. Religion is the same thing. Religion comes from two Latin words, religare, which means to unite again. With what? With yourself. If you lose yourself, it's not worth having anything else in life. You know, there's a brilliant movie, old black and white movie called Random Harvest. I don't think you can even get it now. But it's about a man who went to, I think, First World War to battle. And he has an accident. Physically he recovers, but he loses his memory. So he's sitting there waiting in hospital in England for someone to come and say, yes, this is my son, this is my brother, whatever. Nobody comes. And then a nurse who's looking after the patient, she feels sorry for him, she connects with him, and they fall in love and get married, and they have a child. And then one day he's going to another city to look for a job. He goes for a job interview. And he has another accident. He's crossing the road and a bus hits him. And I think this happens only in movies. I don't know whether it happens in real life. But with that accident, he regains his earlier memory and forgets this. So it's 7 years since he was missing. Suddenly he remembers and he happens to be in the same town. He goes to his home. It's a huge mansion. He's a lord's son, only son, heir to that vast, the wealth. He goes there and there's a long dining table. Beautiful crockery, cutlery, everything. Champagne has been distributed to everyone. They are about to cheer for their inheritance. His sisters and their husbands. You know why? Because there's a rule there by law, even in India it's there. If you're missing for 7 years, you are assumed dead and your assets are distributed to the heirs. Just then he walks in. Now his sisters are not sure whether to be happy that the brother has come or unhappy because they've lost their inheritance. Anyway, he gets back to his routine and he's a wonderful businessman. But he's puzzled. He says, where was I for 7 years? And the only clue he has is the key to his home. And he puts his life on hold. He says, I'm not getting married, nothing, till I find out what I was doing for the last 7 years. And then in one of his factories, there was a strike. So he is going with his HR man to that factory. And when he goes to that place, he asks the HR manager, do you have a cigarette? He says, no. He quickly turns a few corners and finds a cigarette shop. When he comes back, the HR manager asks him, "How did you know that there was a cigarette shop there?" Now everything comes back. And he goes, he finds his way, and the gate to his home, the wicket gate, makes a peculiar sound, a creaking sound. When that sound he gets, he realizes, and he calls out to his wife, and his wife is there waiting for him. Now, why am I telling you this story? Identity. We are not like him. He put his life on hold. He says, until I know the truth, I'm not going to settle down. And throughout, he kept pulling that key out of his pocket and staring at him, trying to remember. See, in and through our lives, whatever it is that you're living, the question should come to us as, who the hell am I? What am I doing in this life? And most of us here are more than halfway through our life, right? I'm sorry to say that, but I'm included in. What is the rest of our life? What is it that I want to do? Why was I born in the first place? These thoughts must come. You must reflect on them. And then you find, even if you don't find the answer, it's okay. But it will do one thing. You will be objective towards everything that is happening in life. Today you're involved, right? Then he says, take shelter in me. Ashraya. What are we taking shelter in now? Our ashraya is money, position, status. A rich man's daughter once wanted to marry a priest. So the parents are very unhappy. The priest has no money. So the father very confidently tells the wife, I will go talk to him and I'll put some sense into him. So he goes very confidently. He's a rich guy. He tells the priest, my daughter is a high maintenance girl. You know what high maintenance is, no? Huh? Many of us are. Means she wants the good things of life. Do you know how much she spends when she shops? Do you know this, that, and the other? And to every question that he asks, he says, God will take care of everything. He's a priest. And after trying several times, half an hour, 1 hour, the guy gives up. He says, this fellow is impossible. He goes back to the wife and wife asks him, so how was it? He kept quiet for a while. And she kept saying, hey, but what did he say? He says, he thinks I'm God. You understood, no? Because when he said God will take care, he means father-in-law will take care of everything. He didn't mean that. This guy understood it like that. But that is it. Your thought should shift from the gross to the subtle, from the mundane to the sublime. It's like sand and glass. Sand is opaque, you can't see through it. But when that same sand is processed in a particular way, it becomes transparent. And then the heaven aspire. Then what you can see through that is amazing. Second verse.
Jnanam teham savidjnanam idam vakshamya sheshatah yajñatva neha bhuyonyat jnatavyam avashishyate.
I will teach you in full this knowledge along with wisdom, beyond which there is nothing more to be known. So, there are 3 stages of learning that we all go through. And unfortunately, we don't follow the other 2. We end with the first. First is Shravana, which takes care of the first stage of ignorance where you say, I don't know. Second stage So you gain information from the world. Then you say, I know, but I don't understand. So the second stage of not understanding is taken care of by manana. And that is very important. Manana means reflection, your own thinking. When you apply yourself to any knowledge. See, you go to an institution to become, let's say, a good lawyer. But that law school can only give you information. It cannot make you a good lawyer. What makes you a good lawyer? Your own thinking. Same thing with the doctor. Now I met she's a friend of mine, a wonderful doctor. She's now very senior in age, but fantastic. And she told me once she was talking about her juniors, a registrar. She said, these girls, they don't know anything. They can't handle any emergency. So she was telling me, patients, the human being doesn't follow the textbook. Things happen outside the textbook. Then what do? They don't know what to do. How will you know what to do? She said, for every lecture that I attended, I used to spend hours in the library. That's how she became an excellent doctor. So that manana is important in any field. Chartered accountancy, marketing, any field, manufacturing. But in the spiritual field, it is all the more important. Because what manana does, thinking, is that it converts knowledge, something objective, to a subjective understanding. It converts theory to practice, experience. It converts sight to insight, and tuition to intuition. So what is it that makes a musician outstanding? What is it that makes an artist perform miracles? What is it that makes you a wonderful person? It's manana, thinking. And unfortunately, in modern life, there is no place for reflection. Why? Because there is an overload of information given to you. And you want to know. There are people who come to me and say, no, I've covered 17 chapters of the Gita. I need to know only one chapter. Then I've finished. I said, yes, correct, you are finished. Because the moment you think you know, that's the end of your learning. Krishna gives both knowledge and wisdom. How, you might wonder, because manana is something you have to do by yourself. By repetition. He presents the same knowledge in the Bhagavad Gita in different ways throughout the 18 chapters. Because otherwise, frankly, what is the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita can be said in 5 minutes. But what do you understand? It's a different thing. Repetition. And then a technique called Pratipaksha Bhavana means the same thing is presented in a different way. And then you say, then it clicks. You say, I got it. That is what a teacher does in school. For a child to learn addition, that 2 plus 2 is 4. The teacher in, I don't know what, kindergarten or class 1 or whatever, she may take 2 months to teach addition because the child doesn't get it. Do you know how difficult it is for a child to conceive addition? She just doesn't say 2 plus 2 is 4. She says, tomorrow you get 2 apples and 2 bananas. And then the child gets. And then you say, okay, how many apples are there? 2. How many bananas are there? 2. Put them together. How many fruit are there? 4. That is that eureka moment in the child. Similarly, Krishna does the same thing with us. He presents the same thing in different ways, and then hopefully someday you say, that eureka moment. I got it. He's waiting for us to do it generation after generation. Nothing happens to us. We are totally immune to knowledge, unfortunately. So, this is it. And then he says, having known which there is nothing more to know. It's like, the mariner's compass. In the old days, a ship would travel all over. From Asia to Europe to America. Following what? They didn't have all these sophisticated instruments. What did they have? Compass. Mariner's compass. Where did that point? Only one direction, north. With that, the captain figured out everything else. Then you know all other directions. Similarly, this points to the moral north, the spiritual north. And once you know that, you know everything. It's like in Random Harvest. Once he knows himself, once he finds that creek in that wicket gate, everything falls in place. See, you must get to the root of the problem, Like, see, in Julius Caesar, Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. No, sorry, not Romeo and Juliet. The basis of this is both Romeo and Juliet belong to warring families. And so, it so happened that one day, both these families crossed each other on a bridge. So, it's an innocuous thing. They could have crossed each other and gone the other way. But suddenly there was a battle. There was shouting, and at the end of that battle, there were two guys lying dead there. So the government appointed a judge, like what happens here. That poor Mr. Lensgart judge is going to be sitting on his head, like the two families. Did you attack? Yes, sir. Why did you attack? Because he attacked. Then, so why did you attack? And he got down to the very last. And he said, did you attack him? He said, yes, sir. Why? Because he bit his thumbs at me, sir. You know what biting your thumb is? Saying katti. That is what children do. Like that. So, the judge didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It's just a ridiculous thing. And for that, people are lying dead there. So he's just tired of the whole thing. He asked the last guy, did you bite your thumb at him? You know what the guy says? I, sir. I bit my thumb, sir. But not at him, sir. No. For that slight misunderstanding, there are guys dying there, dead there. Same thing is happening here. See, you're thinking of Iran. Same thing is happening in our lives, in our families. Mother-in-law thinks daughter-in-law has done something wrong. Now nobody gets to the bottom of it. You ask the daughter-in-law, she'll say, yeah, I bit my thumb, sir, but not at her, sir. Daughter-in-law thinks mother-in-law has done something. Same thing. But you don't have the courage or the will to get to the bottom of it. And the bottom of it is what? Everybody is good. Everybody is good. The exposure is different. The upbringing is different. It's like a brass vessel which is shiny is exposed to the wrong thing and it gets black and ugly. You don't dispose of the brass. Brass is valuable now, right? What do? Brasso technique. You don't even need brass soap. You just get the right thing and rub it. What happens? The oxide goes away and the original brass shines forth. Same thing is with us. We have become black and tarnished by wrong thinking, wrong upbringing, wrong exposure. That's all there is. Deep down, we are divine. You got to be able to scratch the surface. And how do you do that? You identify with the divine in you and you see divinity everywhere. Meaning, you operate out of your goodness. Because you also have, you're tarnished, you also have impurities. You identify with the good in you and then connect with the good in the other person. It's a totally different relationship. The same you, the same that person. And we don't get it. Therefore, you break relationships. Divorces are going up. You quit jobs. The young nowadays don't hang around in a job 6 months and they're out. And 2 generations back, the same guy worked for the same company throughout his life. How did he do it? What has changed? You must think. So that's what it is. As a wise person has said, unless there is an increase in wisdom, any amount of increase in knowledge will only lead to increase in suffering. That's what is happening. We are all suffering because we have knowledge. It has not been converted to wisdom. On that happy note, we'll end for today.
पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते।